For Zoox and Waymo, they are companies that are in deployment
Hmm.
and they have completed more than 300 trips in the quarter. For those, we, on a per trip basis, we collect location data. We collect any passenger data that they collect.
Hmm.
We
Like
collect
number of
vehicle miles,
passengers, right?
right? Vehicle miles traveled, idling, and
Hmm.
then in our most recent decision, we also started collecting what we call stoppage events. I want people to know that our first priority in terms of the AV program is passenger safety, is
Hmm.
to make sure that the experience is safe and enjoyable and predictable for everyone.
So, before we jump into today's episode, I want to share a quick word from our partners at Terawatt. We all know the future of ride hail and autonomy is electric. New fleets are entering markets and need a base of operations, places to charge up and get back on the road. But they can't afford downtime, and that's where Terawatt infrastructure comes in. They take something complex and expensive, fleet charging infrastructure, and delivers, letting fleets focus on their core business of serving rides. Terawatt is building high powered charging hubs strategically placed right where ride hail demand is its highest. So think about 30 plus fast chargers in a central business district. Now that's a lot of power. Their sites are also designed to optimize AV fleet performance with 98% charger uptime, infrastructure for data offload, and thoughtful layouts that get vehicles in and out fast, all for a monthly fee. You can check them out at terawattinfrastructure.com, and we'll also leave contact information for the company in the show notes. All right, on to the episode. Shao Tsen is the Deputy Executive Director for Consumer Policy, Transportation, and Enforcement at the California Public Utilities Commission, or CPUC. She leads consumer protection and enforcement efforts across CPUC regulated entities and oversees safety and policy for passenger transportation services, including rideshare platforms like Uber and Lyft, as well as autonomous vehicles, airport shuttles, limousines, and ferries. Pat joined the CPUC as an administrative law judge in 2013 and is also an adjunct professor at the University of the Pacific McGeorge School of Law and serves as vice chair for the public law section of the California Lawyers Association. Pat, how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
So, you are a lawyer, is what I took from your bio.
Yes, I am.
Excellent. And, the CPUC is an organization that I've been familiar with for close to 10 years, covering Uber and Lyft, and obviously now back in the spotlight again with autonomous vehicles. So, really excited to have you on. And I think also cool to see from your background. It looks like you've been at the CPUC for about 13 or 14 years. Is that right?
That's right. I joined CPUC in 2013. That was immediately after we had started the rulemaking on transportation network
Hmm.
companies. So I feel like my tenure at the commission has been sort of parallel to kind of the rise of the transportation regulation here.
Yeah, definitely. And we may be using some acronyms here and there, but I'll try to explain them. Like TNCs is a good one, transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft. And I guess on that note, I am curious, I mean, the CPUC, it sounds like has been around for quite a while. Do you feel that their importance, their magnitude, at least from a perspective like mine, has grown and, is kind of more important than ever now with Uber and Lyft regulation and of course AVs and, California being the birthplace of Waymo? Oh, I guess basically after Arizona.
That's right. Definitely. I will say that the areas of regulation that is covered by our jurisdiction has to
Hmm.
do with services that the society has deemed to be public utility, right? So
Yeah.
these are things that we need to live our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Energy, transportation, telecommunications. We have a lot of broadband efforts to make sure that people have broadband access all
Hmm.
throughout California. We regulate water as well.
Oh wow.
So 1,600 employees, five commissioners, overseeing many, many areas in the state.
Hmm.
It's I would say within the last 10 to 20 years is when we have become a little more in the spotlight because of the energy transition.
Yeah.
And on the transportation side, we have the emergence of Uber and Lyft in
Hmm.
transportation network companies and now autonomous vehicles. But the commission has existed since 1911.
Oh, wow. And where do you fit into that hierarchy? Are you focused mainly on transportation and autonomous vehicles, or what's your day to day look like?
So, my role as the deputy executive director is I think of it as two pieces. I
Hmm.
oversee consumer protection. So I have a team of staff which enforces and ensures compliance of utilities with our requirements. The commission is unique in the sense that it is a state agency that not only makes the rules, we also have staff that are dedicated to enforcement.
Hmm.
Most state agencies, they will outsource and refer out enforcement actions to the attorney general's office or the district attorney's office. But primarily, any violations that we notice is enforced in-house at the commission. So I have staff overseeing the enforcement piece against utilities that are in violation, but in the consumer protection space, meaning that they have somehow caused financial harm to a customer. So if you're a customer, you've been overcharged, or if you are supposed to be enrolled in Lifeline
Hmm.
or some type of subsidy program, and the utility did not give you proper notice. And they disconnected you, and all of a sudden your bill went up very
Yeah.
significantly. Those are the issues that we take care of. And then I also have transportation. So I oversee both the rail safety division. We have rail safety oversight for all of the rail activity in the state. So every railroad, every rail transit agency, including LA Metro,
Hmm.
SFMTA, SAC-RT, anything that have tracks, even the automated people movers at the
Oh,
airports.
wow.
That is us too. And then transportation, which is the piece that we're talking about here, we oversee fared passenger service, meaning passenger service that is provided by a for profit company
Yeah.
and collect fares. So traditionally, those are airport shuttles,
Hmm.
tour buses, limousines, not taxis, and ferries. And in 2012, we opened a rulemaking and brought the transportation network companies under our jurisdiction because
Yeah.
they provide fair passenger service using a platform.
Yeah, it is funny kind of bringing TNCs and even now AVs under your umbrella. It's not sort of just a small piece to bring in, right? It's this completely huge new
Yeah.
industry with tens of billions of dollars and, millions and people and trips and really big impact.
Yes, yes. And so um, I kind of like to think of it as I get to work on the oldest and the newest industry under
Hmm,
our
that's cool.
jurisdiction. I mean, the
Yeah.
commission started as the Railroad Commission in
Hmm.
1911. And now in 2026, we're in AI and autonomous
Yeah,
vehicles. And it's
definitely.
still, it is still the movement of people and goods.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm going to ask you about railroads today, but we will focus on the autonomous vehicle piece. I don't know. Maybe
Yes,
there are, I have seen some incidents with autonomous vehicles on a railroad. So who knows? Maybe it'll come up, but, and both your passions can combine. But I wanted to start that overview of the CPUC is very helpful. And the other organization that comes to mind that, I guess regular everyday consumers who drive are probably more familiar with would be the Department of Motor Vehicles, right? The DMV. So talk
that's
a
right.
little bit about the two organizations and sort of where you start and end and where they start and end, because I guess we're all kind of using the same roads, but obviously some are personal drivers and
Right.
AVs are sort of doing more of that commercial and for hire fare transportation passengers.
Right. Okay. I'm happy to go into that. So I think of it from the perspective of the role of the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, is that they are ensuring the safety of the technology to operate on California roads.
Hmm.
So an AV company must get either a testing or a deployment permit from the DMV before they're even able to be on public roads in California. They have to make a number of declarations basically
Hmm.
stating that they believe their technology can navigate all of the road conditions that are in their operational design domain that they're proposing,
Hmm.
along with the various weather, people, and traffic patterns. And after they get a permit from the DMV, then they come to the CPUC, and our slice is really the technology that is going to be used to provide passenger service.
Got it.
So that's why kind of what you see is we have Waymo, we have Zoox, but we don't have, for example, the delivery robots
Hmm.
or
Mm.
AVs that are going to be used for freight services.
No drones.
No drones.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so that makes sense. So DMV is sort of more rules of the road, and then when it comes to transporting paying customers, that is where the CPUC steps in.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think on the website of the CPUC, there's actually quite a lot of helpful information. I see background. I see something about a drivered AV passenger service pilot program, a driverless AV passenger service pilot program. So since you are the expert, I guess I would love to know, maybe we kind of even take it from step by step. If I was launching an AV operator in California, it sounds like the first step, I would go to the DMV and present all of that info and get a permit. And then what are the sort of next steps, or if there's anything I'm missing from there?
Right. And then the next step would be you would submit a permit application. If you are interested in providing passenger
Hmm.
service, you would submit a application with the commission to provide service. We do have four kinds of permits. It is drivered, meaning there is a safety driver in the seat ready to take over the vehicle,
Hmm.
and driverless. And also in each of those categories, we have what is called testing and deployment.
Hmm.
So if you're in testing, you are not collecting fares. And while in deployment, that is when you are essentially saying we are commercializing this service and we are
Got it.
going to collect fares from the passengers. We actually adopted that terminology from the DMV because we do try to be consistent and regularly in touch with the DMV and
Hmm.
also with the federal counterparts at NHTSA and TSB and things like that.
Makes sense. So if I'm thinking about it in real world terms, Waymo is operating a driverless service and they are in the deployment phase because they are doing paid customer trips. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's right. And there isn't a requirement that you apply for these four permits incrementally or one after the other. It has happened that way.
Mm-hmm.
Waymo went from a driver testing to driver deployment and
Mm-hmm.
then to driverless testing and driverless deployment, but
Yeah.
there isn't a actual requirement that a company go through those pieces sequentially.
Got it. So was there a stage, I guess, where Waymo was drivered? So there was a safety driver behind the wheel of their Jaguar vehicle, and then they
Yep.
were deployed, I guess, but they weren't giving public rides. Maybe they were giving to employees or friends and family, things like that.
They were.
Hmm.
And also, there was a period in which I think they were collecting fares, but to a limited number of people. There was a waiting list
Right.
to be signed up
Yeah.
into the app.
Well, and I guess that's the other semi-confusing piece that the companies obviously launch with their own terminology. I think now when Waymo launches in Miami, for example, they launch, they're available for public rides, but yeah, there's still a wait list or, it's not actually technically available to all of the public yet, right?
That's right.
And I guess that is up to the purview of each company.
We do generally what we view our role in terms of being a regulator of the space is that we try to be technology agnostic. We are not trying to encourage or discourage any type of business model
Hmm.
and or technology platform. What we want is to make sure that we have a foundation on which We set general rules that we want everybody to follow because we think that is necessary to make sure that passengers are safe.
Yeah.
And as long as the companies meet those requirements, we don't dictate how they run their business and how they want to expand.
Got it. Makes sense. So we talked about, I guess Waymo is sort of, I kind of think of them as the gold standard, at least in terms of operating with paid driverless rides. I guess, in California, for example, I was in San Francisco. I saw you recently at one of our events and where we
Right.
met. And during that trip, I actually did take a Zoox ride and I also took a Tesla robotaxi ride. So I think Tesla robotaxi would be at the opposite end of the spectrum. They have a safety driver in the car, so that's drivered, but they are deployed because you can. I mean, I did pay for the
Well,
trip, right?
actually, so that's actually a great point to bring up. Tesla is not operating a autonomous vehicle service.
Hmm.
So in California, we define autonomous vehicles to be those that are SAE level 3. So
Hmm.
Society of Automotive Engineer level 3, meaning that the onboard AI system is capable of navigating designated
Gotcha.
road conditions within a operational design domain.
On its own.
Tesla is a level 2 system. And so they do not have a permit
Hmm.
with the California Public Utilities Commission. And my understanding is that they do not have a permit with the DMV either to offer those service in California. What they have from us is essentially a charter party carrier permit. It is the same type of permit that a limousine company would get from the
Hmm.
CPUC to provide a limousine service. So, in terms of our view of
Hmm.
the person who is sitting in the driver's seat, that is the driver. That is
Gotcha.
not a safety driver.
So even if
That
they're using
person,
a tool to help them
yeah,
drive autonomously, there is a driver in the safety seat. So it's more of a
right,
category of drivered chauffeur.
right. Yes.
And what was the
And
term you
so
said?
it's
Chartered.
similar to a person using full self-driving supervised
Hmm.
on the Uber platform.
Yeah, got it. So the what was the term you used? It was
Charter party carrier.
chartered party carrier. That might be a new one. I don't know if I've heard of that one yet, to be honest. You might have taught me something so far because I believe Tesla and Waymo do have not to, we're getting in the weeds, so it's okay. But they also have TCP stickers, right?
That
Which
is that is what it
is that
is.
what
I
that
don't
is? Okay,
know why a charter party carrier permit
it's not
is
TCP.
yeah, the acronym is TCP,
Okay, so that is the
but
same thing we're talking about. So
it is
that
the
is the
same thing.
designation. If I'm an Uber Black driver, I have to have a TCP. If I want to do a for hire, basically private ride on my own, I need commercial insurance and a TCP
Right.
license. And so I guess
That's right.
Waymo also has a TCP
Yes,
license in addition to the driverless deployment permit.
that's right.
Okay, interesting. So I guess what this means for me on a selfish level, I won't be seeing any data from the CPUC on Tesla's operations yet because they're not
In
under one of
terms
these
of,
four
yes,
permits.
they're not subject to the autonomous vehicle program
Hmm.
reporting requirements.
Got it. So if I want, let's say my goal is to get to the level, I'm an AV company and my goal is to get to the Waymo levels. Do I need to go through one or any of those permits, or can I just apply for, like you said, the driverless deployment permit with the CPUC?
You can, in theory,
Hmm.
but in order to have your permit approved, so we do have a requirement that once you have received the permit from the DMV, so in
Hmm.
this case, in your hypothetical, this company went to DMV and was able to get a deployment permit from the DMV in
Hmm.
some geographic area in California. And our requirement is that they then operate in that geographic area for at least 30 days
Gotcha.
before they submit a permit application with
Okay, that
us.
makes sense.
And then once they submit that application to the commission, our staff will review it. It has, there's a basically there's a form. There always
Hmm.
is. The form has a bunch of categories of information that you have to include. And then we also ask for what we call a PSP, which is a passenger safety plan. So this is a plan that really talks about use cases, that talks about what
Yeah.
the company's process and procedures are to ensure passenger safety, what it will do if a unexpected event occurs or if there is an emergency,
Hmm.
how do they approach pickup and drop offs,
Yeah.
what are so a lot of various
Hmm.
use cases for the permit that they're applying for.
Yeah.
And then our staff reviews it for reasonableness, and then it is put into we call it a resolution because it is drafted by staff, but essentially it is a decision that is proposed before the five commissioners, and we have a voting meeting about every 2 weeks.
Hmm.
The commissioners then review our proposal, and they will conceivably approve that resolution, and then that then becomes the permit.
Yeah.
I don't I mean, it is possible, but it's difficult for me to contemplate a scenario in which a operator having only operated for 30 days
Hmm.
without further data that can be provided to staff to show that they've been able to operate without
Yeah.
incident, that they have the experience, they have the technology, and they should be granted a permit,
Yeah.
without some additional information.
Yeah.
um, I would imagine in that type of scenario, my staff would be asking a lot of follow up
Hmm.
questions.
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons I was excited to have you on and to kind of go into this process, I think for probably folks in the AV industry, I think that they're generally pretty bullish of the technology and confident in these services. But I think from a lot of, you are a consumer protection agency, right? And from a lot of the general public, I hear a lot of questions that are more around, how are they safe? Who's regulating? What are they doing? And so I guess if I put myself in their shoes for a second, I'm kind of being reassured that there's actually quite a lot that goes into, I mean, it makes sense, I'm sure, but like obviously you kind of want someone to check a lot of these things. I guess one question that I have is when it comes to, we don't have to go into all the details of these reviews, but is it more subjective in nature or is it more objective, the approvals of these services?
I would say that it is so we had a pretty extensive rulemaking process in which a lot of stakeholders were in place, including some of the labor representatives and
Hmm.
union interests. So, in that process, the commission designated and decided on what the permit application should look like and the
Hmm.
criteria by which staff would evaluate those permit applications.
Got it.
So it's not really a very discretionary
Hmm.
process. We have a number of criteria that we have to follow in making our recommendations.
Yeah.
Um, but we are also aware and recognize that this is a rapidly
Yeah.
evolving industry with a lot of very creative people coming up with a lot of new modes of um, operations, partnerships,
Yeah.
and different types of technology. And so we view our sort of safety oversight as something that is evolving.
Hmm.
And for example, sometimes if an event occurs and we have regular contact and check-ins with the permitted companies. So currently, those that are in commercial operations is Waymo and Zoox.
Hmm.
And so we have the ability to reference specific incidents and ask whether or not this is something that was contemplated in the company's internal procedures and
Hmm.
whether or not the company's response and treatment of that incident followed their own internal processes.
Got it.
And if it doesn't, or if it wasn't contemplated, then we ask, are you now making changes? Are you
Hmm.
updating your process? I think it's we try to recognize the fact that you're never going to be able to anticipate every
Right.
contingency and every fact in every scenario. But is the company responsive and quick in updating their own procedures to make sure that in the future they're able to address them?
Yeah. So would that be more enforcement or would that be kind of more working with a company if an incident were to arise?
I think at that point, that's more of a program implementation
Got it.
step. But if in that process, the so we think of it as there are two sides of the house,
Hmm.
right? We have our program staff, and then we also have a group called the Transportation Enforcement Branch. So those folks are specifically focused on compliance and enforcement of the transportation entities. And so if in the process of working with the entity, the program staff feels or determines that they think a violation has occurred,
Hmm.
not a and that violation was specifically contemplated, by a decision or by a resolution, and it looks like it may have been violated,
Yeah.
then a referral is made to our enforcement side. And then that side conducts a independent and separate investigation. So
Hmm.
we sort of want to ensure the the independence
Hmm.
of the investigation that happens. And so we have internal firewalls that are put in place to make sure that those investigations happen. And if staff determines that there is a violation, then they move forward with a citation, with a formal investigation. We call
Hmm.
them order instituting investigations, or a order to show cause, or some type of enforcement order.
Got it. Are there, it might be on the website, I'm guessing, but are there specific examples from in the past where you have cited a company or an operator? And I'm guessing that there was some fine or resolution or something like that in the AV space.
Right. So the most prominent one would be the order to show cause that was issued against Cruise
Got it.
when it failed to disclose the facts surrounding the incident with the pedestrian.
Got it.
So the commission issued a order to show cause in that incident, and there were fines and penalties.
Got it. And so, I mean, typically it sounds like it has to be a pretty serious situation. Maybe, I guess, a little subjective what's serious, but something bad has to happen.
Um, we do have some general guidelines in
Hmm.
terms of what would automatically trigger
Got it.
an investigation. Like, for example, if there is a fatality,
Hmm. Okay.
if there is even injury requiring hospitalization,
Mm.
and or if there is a identified trend in terms
Hmm.
of the complaints that we are receiving.
Got it.
So we do have the ability to receive complaints. If you go to our website and you look up our consumer affairs branch,
Hmm.
you have the ability to submit a complaint against any of our regulated entities,
Hmm.
so including AV companies, and that is then forwarded to enforcement. We also have regular sort of touch points with the DMV because occasionally we will receive complaints that are about the ability of the technology to operate on the roads, and that's
Hmm.
not necessarily within our jurisdiction. We will then refer those complaints to the DMV and vice
Got it.
versa. They will receive complaints that are about the passenger service provided, and they will provide that to us.
Interesting. Okay. So that's sort of a lot more on the serious incidents when it comes to ongoing. So it sounds like there is quite a bit of ongoing reporting and compliance for these AV operators. You talked about some of these serious incidents. I guess another area that we've covered in the past would be the data requirements, which are, well, again, available. I think you guys do a very good job updating these quarterly on the CPUC website. And so I guess talk a little bit about, are there any other reporting requirements, or is it mainly that data piece that companies need to submit to the CPUC?
So the quarterly report are the required data that we have determined is necessary for us to track to
Hmm.
evaluate how the company is doing. But at any time, if there is an incident or if staff have questions about how the manufacturer or how the company
Hmm.
is operating, we have the ability to request additional and further information through what we call data requests.
Got it.
So we draft questions, we provide them to the company. They have a certain number of days um, that they can respond, and it goes back and forth.
Got it. So that sounds like a little bit more of a one-off. And then what is the current data that AV companies must submit to the CPUC? I think it's things like total trips and things like that.
Right. I let's see. I actually um, We for Zoox and Waymo, they are companies that are in deployment,
Hmm.
and they have completed more than 300 trips in the quarter. For those, we on a per trip basis, we collect location data. We collect any passenger data that they collect.
Hmm.
We
Like
collect
number of
vehicle miles.
passengers, right?
Right. Vehicle miles traveled, idling, and
Hmm.
then in our most recent decision, we also started collecting what we call stoppage events.
Hmm.
So these are events in which either one, the vehicle is stopped more than 2 minutes,
Hmm.
or two, that it required intervention either through a remote operator or manual towing to remove the vehicle from the
Got it.
event that is causing it to stop.
Got it. Yeah, I think the last category is interesting because, I think we've talked about in some of our podcasts that a lot of the companies are more, incident or collision focused, right? The number of avoid collisions, right? Avoid
Yeah,
people fatalities, avoid injuries, right? But there are a lot of situations that are a little bit more of a gray area, and I think that metric, I'm guessing, is designed to capture those, right? If an AV is blocking traffic for 30 minutes, nobody died, but it's, disrupting a lot of people and causing a lot of
exactly.
issues, right?
Right. And there was some discussion about, where do we set that time, right?
Hmm.
And ultimately, I think we wanted to capture the more the events that we view are more likely to cause significant disruptions.
Hmm.
And so ultimately, the commission determined that 2 minute was the
Yeah.
appropriate metric.
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. Now, so is this part of the data package that is all of this data will be available publicly going forward on a quarterly basis?
Yes, but so it's one of those where, so generally speaking, what our our position on data that is submitted to the commission is
Yeah.
that it is public. We are a
Hmm.
state agency. We are subject to public record requirements. And so our initial position is always that everything is public,
Hmm.
unless it fits into a specific exemption that has been set out in statute. And
Got it.
so within the AV program and also within the TNC program, the exemptions that are typically used by the companies have to do with sensitive business data
Hmm.
or trademarked um, or things that affect their operations and trade secret type of
Yeah.
information. And then there are also we also want to make sure that we don't inadvertently share personally identifiable
Right.
information.
For sure. Well, yeah, I think the personally identifiable information is probably one everyone can agree on. I know that the CPUC used to release, and this is sort of now we're talking my personal projects, but they used to release the number of vehicles and the trips per day, which is basically utilization, which I think was interesting. But that is no longer available. So I guess that would be a situation where the companies basically said we don't want to provide that information anymore.
There has been a number of, so the commission has issued several decisions on each of the annual reports that have been
Hmm.
filed, and this is within the transportation network company space.
Yeah.
And then there has been a claim of confidentiality that has been asserted by the companies. And the commission has issued decisions. Those have then been appealed
Hmm.
and then came back. And I think we're in um, several iterations
Got it.
of various
I mean,
appealing
I guess I
process
would
on
kind of
that.
imagine in general, right? The companies don't want to share any or much data, and consumers want to see as much, researchers want to see as much as possible to study the effects and the impacts of, new technology. So I guess like more broadly, how do you like what do you think should be the balance of what, the public should know, maybe should regulators know a little bit more than the public? And then there are probably some legitimate numbers that the companies maybe shouldn't have to share because it is very privy to their business operations.
And I think that's what we try to balance.
Hmm.
And that's what our decision makers, the judges and the assigned commissioners, try to balance
Got it.
whenever they are doing their evaluation and determination, right? You will see from a number of decisions that the commission has issued on data
Hmm.
where they talk about the positions of in those, we actually get a lot of participants. We have universities, researchers submitting comments to the commission about how
Yeah.
important it is for them to have access to this information. We also have the companies talking about how detrimental it would be if any of these information is released. And then
Hmm.
the decision ultimately reached is intended to address all of those concerns and come to a balanced outcome.
Got it.
But that those decisions are in various stages of
Yeah.
being contested.
So a good compromise. Everybody's a little bit unhappy, right?
That's what they say in ADR and mediation.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, you are a lawyer too. So
Yeah.
you're in a. I guess now I can see why it's such an important piece of the job. And kind of wrapping up here, I guess the other topic that ties this all together, and that I think consumers care a lot about. And we've seen a lot of recent news and incidents about the remote operators that are sometimes guiding some of these vehicles, and also kind of like I think that ties into like these non-collision incidents, right, where it's either a vehicle is blocking first responders or causing traffic, right? Obviously there was a big blackout in San Francisco that where vehicles were stuck. I guess how do you is this the CPUC's job to kind of things like that happen and we need to investigate and regulate? Because I imagine these are kind of like new problems, like no one knew this would even be a problem until recently. So is that your role, and how do you kind of handle that or plan to handle those going forward?
I think our approach in looking at something like that is going to be similar in how we have created the program, which is
Hmm.
how does that impact passenger safety?
Got it.
And the fact is that the use of a remote assistant.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you're aware, but the DMV is promulgating, new proposed regs, and
Hmm.
in those regs, it does talk a little bit about the remote, the participation of humans that are not physically in the car.
Yeah.
And so there are a couple of different ways, not in California, but I'm aware that there are operational models in which it is not a remote assistant, it is a
Hmm.
remote driver. So the
Right.
driving task is being done by a person who's not in the car. But in California, the majority of these services are being provided by
Right.
people who
The,
supposedly aren't, right?
the yeah,
They're providing guidance
mhm.
to the vehicle, but
The
the
remote
driving
driving, yeah,
task.
I think is a little more clear cut. They're physically driving the vehicle over a network. I think it's a lot more a tricky challenge when they're guiding, right? What is considered guiding? Oh, the light is green or yellow, but if they mess that up, I think they're kind of driving. And in other
Mhm.
situations, it might just be, is there a box in the road? Should I avoid it? Or, go through this double yellow line.
Yeah,
I'm breaking the law, but if I don't, then 1,000 people are going to back up behind me. I should probably go around that. I would think that's more guidance. So it's a bit of a
right.
gray area. So that's more
And we can
DMV
see
then?
that. And that is something that we are monitoring. I
Hmm.
think we do see it as a ongoing issue that is sort of becoming more and more um, visible
Yeah.
in terms of how the companies are operating and how they are even providing these guidance
Hmm.
in times of emergency or in times of incidents.
Yeah.
So we are monitoring it, and it is why we have a active rulemaking at the commission that is specifically focused on AV issues. And
Yeah.
so if folks are interested, they definitely should come to our website. You can sign up for it's called information only.
Hmm.
Essentially, what it means is you sign up, you put in your email address, and anytime something is filed
Hmm.
onto the docket, whether it is a ruling by the judge or a brief or any type of comments on that proceeding, you will get an email
Yeah.
and you'll get a link to get access to that. And the proceeding also allows for people to file their comments
Hmm.
on the proceeding itself. So you don't have to become a party. You can just, as a member of the public, go to the actual docket of the AV rulemaking,
Yeah.
and you can click make comment, and you'll be able to submit your opinion
All
on the
right.
program.
Be careful what you wish for. I think that you're really opening up a lot of opportunities for people to comment. And no, I think that is cool though, and also reassuring that there is, even though we may not see it publicly, there is a lot going on behind the scenes from a regulatory perspective to keep customers safe when it comes to AVs. So I think maybe we'll leave links in the show notes to all that, and maybe a good final parting question to leave on. I mean, is there anything that you at the CPUC wish the public better understood about your role in regulating autonomous vehicles? I think it's interesting that they can kind of, observe and get engaged. Anything else you want to mention?
I think I want people to know that our first priority in terms of the AV program is passenger safety, is
Hmm.
to make sure that the experience is safe and enjoyable and predictable for everyone. And the second piece, I think it would be good for folks to understand, is that what we have is only a part of the program, which is that we regulate the passenger transportation side.
Hmm.
We don't necessarily have the ability to um, go into the lane of our sister agency, the
Hmm.
DMV, in terms of the technology's ability to navigate public roads.
Got it. Okay. Very interesting. Well, Pat, I appreciate you coming on, breaking down the role of the CPUC, sharing all of those acronyms. I think there'll be a test at the end of this podcast for those who want to try their hand at it. And we'll leave links to everything you mentioned in the show notes. Sound good?
That sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Pat.